Now, uh, we kind of missed out on this car deal. Before I was ever born, a few years after Grandpa St. Pierre married your grandma, Melissa was her name. Melissa Manning. But then when he married her, of course, she became a St. Pierre. Well, they bought a car, used car. It was an Oldsmobile, one cylinder, chain drive, open car. And the seat was like a buggy seat. It didn't have a steering wheel. It had what they call a poker guide. You'd push the handle from to like the old style airplanes. They had a stick. See, you push the handle to the right, you'd go right. Push it to the left, you go left. And that's the way they drove this thing. And it had Presto lights or acetylene gas, kind of a gas light, and which did barely made enough light that they could see the road if they drove after dark. But never did drive after dark too much, the way I understand. I never rode in it. But I see some pictures of our cousins in Monticello, which is 85 and 90 years old. Three of them, they're still living. Has pictures of them, of those two cars. Uncle Ed had one, Dad's brother, and Dad had one. And they're sitting there in front of their Uncle Ed's house by a gas tank. They would pump gas out of it. It was a square tank sitting on top of the ground, had a little roof over it, and they'd pump gas out of that into their cars to go. And Dad would get his gas there. The only place around the country you could get gas. So you didn't have any service stations, and very, very few garages. Had blacksmiths all over for horses. Okay, now, one I can remember real good. One time they was going to St. Anne in this car, and Dad was telling me about it. And it had clincher rims. The tire was different than what they are now. Once they put them on, they would fit inside of the rim of the tire, or the bead would set inside of a kind of a groove like, and it had to be pried and pushed in there, they thought, to keep the tire, when it was inflated, from coming off the wheel. But today, you know how they're fixed today, they was all wrong. But anyway, they were going to St. Anne. They blew out one tire. Didn't have any spare, no way to fix it. So what they do, they went out in a hay field, Timothy hay, and braided hay as tightly and hard as they could, and put it inside the tire. It blew out, and then put the tire back on. I guess it took them a couple of days to get it St. Anne. And they went around the road, and then when this hay got all chewed up, you know, got all in one place like a knot, well, they'd take it off and do it again, and maybe go 8-10 miles. And I imagine it wasn't going over 5 or 6 miles an hour, see. And of course, that's dirt roads. I can remember when we used to go with the other cars on dirt roads. And rain would come, we'd slide all over, and that was so much fun. I thought it was great, but Mom and Dad, they was scared, you know, they might slide off in a ditch. But well, I thought it was great. And that's where I got my impression, I think, of him being such a good driver. Heck, nobody else could drive like he could. My aunts would always brag on Dad, you know, and other brothers, his brothers, how good he was at driving, when the other guys, his brothers, didn't even own a car. See, they was afraid to buy one. But anyway, and you got that little piece of brass plate with wood behind it, about 1.5 inches long or 2, and 1.25 inches wide, and that's for that Oldsmobile car, chain drive Oldsmobile. It was a 1901 car. Now, I think it's written on the backside with ink on that wood. And if you look for it, and if you find it, I think you'll find that. And I put that on years and years ago, but you should fix it a little better, maybe. Just come off of that Oldsmobile, the body of it. And the car I'm talking about, I remember seeing the frame of it and the wheels laying in the back and behind the barn years and years ago. And in fact, I used to play with it. If I'd known it was going to be valuable, or we'd have kept good care of that stuff. But someday I may be able to get a picture of those cars. Now, I don't know if you knew this or not. Dad's parents were Catholic at one time, and Mother's parents were Catholic. But there was a priest in St. Anne, Illinois, by the name of Father Shinnicky, changed over to be a Presbyterian, and a lot of his congregation went with them. And that's the reason why Dad and Mom, their folks, changed to be Presbyterians. That's the reason why Dad was a Presbyterian, such as I am. I'm a Presbyterian, baptized in the Presbyterian Church in Remington, okay? Now, but I do go to Catholic Church with aunts, because I think that's great. After all, what's the difference? All railroads go that was headed for Chicago, they all get there, don't they? No matter what part of the country, we're all airplanes headed for Chicago, they get there. And so we're all headed for the same thing anyway, someday, I hope. And now I'm going to shut you off a minute. I just thought of something else. Dad bought that Oldsmobile, that little bitty car, in 1904, I think, long in there, from George Ade at where was today George Ade at Brook. He was an Indiana State poet. Now, Joe probably, or maybe yourself, maybe you can remember that, but I bet you if you inquire around, they know George Ade. Now, that's where the car came from originally. That little plaque you got, George Ade owned it. I'm kind of talking around here. This is Sunday morning, and real nice here. And I forgot to say, maybe it'd be good to put in here. I'm almost 74 years old. I'm 73 years old, and real healthy yet. Able to go around and work, and in fact, I'm working at the Alpha Beta store. And I'm putting this in because years from now, I wonder if he was able to walk or not. A couple of things I can remember when you was just a little bitty kid. He was probably one and a half years old. We was living on Uncle Ed's farm. And mother, it was the summertime, and your mother would let you run around with just a diaper on, maybe to keep cool. So we had electric fences around to keep cattle in. So one day, you wanted to go out in the field for some reason or other, and you had to crawl underneath this fence with this barbed wire. The barbed wire about, 16 inches or so above the ground, and you knew enough to bend over and crawl underneath this wire. So when you crawled underneath the wire, there was a barb on the wire, it caught your diaper. And luckily, your diaper was dry, but you couldn't get off the wire, and otherwise, if it had been wet, you being barefoot, you'd have got really shocked, for the electric fence. I remember that real good, because we had to run over and get you. And then that time that some of the incidences, you and I and Ricky was planting corn, and you guys were riding on the back of the farm-all tractor, and Ricky fell off and had that four-wheel planter, and we ran over him, was dragging him on the ground, and you hollered to stop, and I looked back, and there was Rick, all full of dirt and everything. I jumped off the tractor and carried him to the house. That was one of the bad experiences. And then another time, Ricky seemed like he was always in trouble. He was about 5, 6 years old. We was picking corn, and one time he crawled up a tree and right there by the barn, and we couldn't find him. And he sat in a big limb about 20 feet above the ground. And then he'd run off and hide sometimes, and we'd have to find him. And, we'd take the whole family and go looking for him. And all those kind of things like that. Let me think a while. This messes you up a little bit, but I'll go back a number of years now, even before I even got married. You probably wonder what kind of entertainment we'd have for us guys. Well, on Wednesday nights, we'd go to town to a band concert and listen to the town band. We'd go to Remington on Wednesday, and Thursday night we'd go to Woken. And then on Saturday night we'd go to town. We'd all the kids would get a nickel to spend for whatever we want. Of course, a nickel would buy a lot. And We'd walk the streets while the band was playing and play games with some other boys, you know. I knew some Shorkey kids and Laney kids. They'd be there too. And that was a big thrill. We always looked forward for that. And then the folks, they would play cards. Oh, when we'd go to Lafayette, Joe, you know that big wooden bridge? Oh, it ain't big no more. The wooden bridge that goes over the railroad track, pretty close to your folks. We used to have to cross that bridge before, you know, for some reason or other. The road wasn't like it is today. Different road. And we'd cross that bridge. And I'm telling you, that bridge seems to me like it was a mile high. You know what bridge I mean? It's right there by the Oaks, that restaurant. On the schools, now the country schools we went through was a one-room school, and it was probably 25 feet long and about 25 feet wide and maybe 40 feet long. And then the way they heated it had a great big stove in the center of the room, and we burnt coal and cobs and wood in it, and some of the bigger boys had to keep it fired up during the school time, or the hours during school. And it had a blackboard that went, maybe halfway around the school. And the seats, they were a lot like the seats they used to have when you was going to school. Had one teacher, and the grades would be from 1st to 8th grade, and that's all. When we lived in Gary, let's see, there was Norma, she's a little bitty kid. Loretta, she was a little bit younger, and Ted. Now, you wasn't born yet. I'm sure I'm right on that. But I lived in Gary 5 years, or Mom and I and the family lived in Gary, in that vicinity. We first lived at 805 Maryland in Gary, and then the rent was so high, and we found a place in Maryville, which the town's still there, that we could rent for $15 a month, so we moved there. And it was a house, you know. And we had brand new furniture had bought.